Brad and I actually taught together at the Naval Academy for about 7 years, which is how we got to know each other and work together in this research. And it came together in a period back in about 2014 when we had this idea that as we were looking at broadly, not just at the Naval Academy where we were teaching at the time in the military, but broadly across our society, where the gender inequities and the challenges we were having about integrating and having men and women work together wasn't really so much, it was a systemic problem, but a lot of the structural solutions and challenges around retention and advancement, we just weren't getting there because they tended to be kind of couched in this idea of about these are women's issues, right? We can solve this by fixing women and some sort of a women's leadership initiative or a diversity program for this. And of course, you know, everyone's been through a lot of different kinds of diversity training and maybe even unconscious bias training, and it just isn't moving the needle fast enough. And my good friend and colleague Brad Johnson at the Naval Academy, who focuses all of his research in the area of mentoring relationships, we got together and we were talking about this, and I said, you know, one of the things that I find is that we just don't engage men in this conversation in the same way that we look at women. This is a women's issue. And that one of the things in particular that we know is that if it's a women's issue, that men just don't get as involved in it, right? And so it's harder to get men there. But if we make it a leadership issue, or we make it a mentoring issue, some of these other areas that men tend to perk up and go, wow, you know, I'm engaged, I'm interested, and I want to be part of that conversation. So Brad and I decided to work together, and we wrote Athena Rising to talk in particular about the cross-gender aspects of professional relationships in the workplace, men and women, and in particular in mentoring relationships. And over the past 2 years, as we've been traveling across the country, talking about this, that it's really broadened out into especially a more, I think, a broader topic of allies at work. And so how can we, in partnering together in gender partnership in particular, be better male allies as men and allies for each other as men and women? So what we do get to find is that as we travel across the country, that people find this to be a really riveting conversation that we're going to have with you. And I think our students are a great example of that. And you can see here that Brad threw me under the bus, so here he goes. This is Brad's class. No, just kidding. But no, hopefully we will do about 20, 25 minutes of the conversation here today, and we really want to engage you in a conversation, a dialogue today about some of the concerns and things that are maybe going on around here at Biola. We just had a great conversation with the PAC, and I think there's a broader conversation we can have here.
So yeah, this may seem like a weird way to begin if we were going to ease into the topic, but I think we have to talk about this, right? It's about a year into Me Too. We're finding, Lean In organizations done a lot of research, and we're finding that men are reporting they're just a little less comfortable, right? Right now, this year, having relationships with women at work, being transparent about that, having lunch, having coffees, and partly because of this. You know, I'm just not sure if it's safe, if I can do this. And I will just tell you that if you're a guy who is not a serial perpetrator or a chronic sexual harasser in the workplace, I think you have very little to worry about here. And I think that we've got to watch this narrative that women are often making false accusations. Not a shred of evidence to support that. You just don't find that. So men might have anxiety, but as a clinical psychologist, let me just share with you, the only treatment for that is exposure therapy. You have to engage more. You have to have more conversations, more engagement, and you really have to come to the table and do this if you want to overcome the anxiety. So I think you're going to see that's our messaging. I want to give you a sense of what was going on when Dave and I began writing this. This had just happened. I don't know if you remember this. British Nobel Prize winning physicist, just won the Nobel, was asked in an interview, well, do you work with women in the lab? And this was his comment about that, and it may shock you that he got a little pushback in the media. But this was just kind of tip of the iceberg. Dave and I were in the DC area at that time, and a story came out in the Washington Post about women staffers on Capitol Hill And there was an implicit policy that if you're a woman on Capitol Hill working with a congressman, you can never be seen with him after 5 or 6. No evening events, no evening meetings. Why? Gossip. You don't want it to affect his campaign. Nobody was asking, well, what's the effect of this on women working on Capitol Hill? Well, the Washington Post dug down and looked, and sure enough, women on Capitol Hill were making far less. They were getting far fewer promotions, because where do you think all the business happens on Capitol? It's in the evening. It's at events. It's at receptions. So the ripple effects of these things that sound benign on the surface have consequences, and in this case, for women in particular. And then the final thing I'll just share with you, Dave and I work with Navy and Marine Corps officers every day, and the very first woman, Kate Germano, somebody Dave and I have gotten to know well, was the CO of a Marine Corps boot camp, the very first woman to be the CO. She was fired after a few months on the job. Any idea why? Too aggressive. And Dave and I, we looked at each other and just said, really, a Marine, aggressive? It highlighted this kind of double standard, that women face all the time. We as guys don't feel it. It doesn't happen to us. But all of this stuff around bias and how we see women really kind of pushed us into this space.
Funny, when we told that to the Marines, they didn't laugh like that.
They didn't laugh.
On a more serious note, Kate Germano's book, Fight Like a Girl, great read, whether you understand the military or not. Talk about systemic inequity, gender inequity in particular, is a great read. Highly recommended. So let me just be real quick about the fact that, hey, there is a business imperative, and it doesn't matter what your business is, doesn't matter what your mission is. We work with the military and national security organizations out there. We work with corporate organizations. We work with higher ed institutions. We all have a mission and a bottom line of some sort, right? We measure how successful we are in accomplishing what we're trying to do. And there is a business imperative to diversity, and in particular, we're to talk today, our focus is on gender diversity. And so, as we find the evidence continues to pile up, that again, we see that if you have a more gender diverse senior leadership team, all the way up through again, here like at the administrative levels and your C-suite levels, and all the way up into today, more focus on boards and boardrooms today, that this is where we find better levels of decision making, we find more innovativeness, more creativity. And if you measure your bottom line in terms of money, profit and loss, again, you're going to find more profits up in the double-digit percentages. So if you measure it that way, it ought to be compelling to you to do that. In national security and the military realm, we measure it in mission effectiveness, mission completion. And we do find it there again as well. So the evidence is continuing to pour in, to pile in, to make the business case and the imperative here. The interesting part of this is that leaders across organization, mostly men, are still not getting it and understanding the fact that, look, we are still excluding women in a variety of different ways in our organizations. We're not valuing the talent that we have. We see that when it comes to pay, we see it when it comes to promotions, we see it when it comes to retention, right? And we see it when it comes to harassment in the organization. It still exists. It's still highly prevalent out there. So we've got to find a way that we can value 100% of the talent, not 50% of the talent in our organization, but 100%. It's an imperative to our employees, the organization as a whole, our customers, to our students in this case, right, and our faculty out there. If we don't, right, we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? We do it at our own detriment if we do not value talent the same way. One of the things we often get from a lot of organizations, especially that are male-dominated, is, yeah, but Dave, Brad, we've been doing this for a while now. We've had the gender diversity training. We get it. We're way past that. Why are we even talking about this? This is 2018. I said, yes, it is. My question back to you is, how do you know? How do you know that you're getting and you're accomplishing what you set out to do, that you really do get it in that way? Do you have metrics? Do you have ways to measure it? Are you achieving your mission in the same way? Harvard Business did a study 2 years ago, and they looked at about 800 organizations across the country. They asked the senior leadership the same question. Are you including women in all the important decisions that are being made in your company? 92% of the men said, yep, absolutely we are, definitely. 82% of the women said, nope, we're being excluded in some way in our company when it comes to decisions that are being made. We have a disconnect, and we're here to address that. One of the things that we know right, as we talk about mentoring relationships and professional relationships, period, is that mentoring tends to be looked at in a very traditional hierarchical way, but we know that the more reciprocal or mutual the relationship is and how we work together with each other, the more advantages, the more that we each win. We each get something out of that in particular. We also know that for traditionally underrepresented groups in our organizations out there, they are more likely to be attracted to these kinds of mentoring and developmental relationships, right? So if you're trying to increase the amount of mentoring and development of women in your organization, you need to go and move towards a more reciprocal perspective on how you view mentoring.
And I think we can skip the guru, dude. We've kind of addressed that, but I also just want to kind of suggest that if men are not leaning into the mentoring of women very directly and a sponsoring of women very directly, it often is not going to happen. And it's not because women are not willing. They do. They mentor junior women. There just aren't enough. And the farther you go up the chain of command, the fewer women you've got available. So men have got to lean in. We know that men who are active sponsors and mentors of women actually get a bump up in their annual evaluations. Women who champion junior women for promotion may actually take a little hit sometimes, and not fair, but they may be showing favoritism from the perspective of the organization. We have to address this issue. Do we jump ahead? Yeah. We got to address attraction. We mentioned this briefly early this morning, but sometimes Dave and I get pushback when we're talking to guys about being great mentors for women, that what if I'm attracted? Oh my goodness, I wouldn't know what to do. And we do find men doing two dysfunctional things when they notice they're attracted. There's probably more than that, but two especially. They'll either notice they're attracted to a woman they're working with and then run away, become absent, leaving her wondering what's going on, or they make it her problem. Gosh, I'm attracted to you. What should we do about that? Not really useful, and kind of creepy. And so, gotta be aware. I would just say, if you're a heterosexual male, and you do a lot of this work and you do it well, it would be odd if at one point you didn't realize this person's kind of attractive that I'm working with. And I think that could be normalizing for you to do that. We do have a big scientific breakthrough to share that I think also will help men feel better about this. And so it's a neuroimage. Go ahead. It turns out we do have a frontal lobe, the men. And so we can be aware of attraction, and we can have good judgment and decision making, and good governing of our behavior. And just one last thing I'll share is, again, we could spend 5 hours talking about this, but one last stream of research we love in social psychology is on perceived mutual attraction. So they go into a workspace, they have everybody there rate how attractive do you find everybody that you're working with? And then there's another column where they rate, well, how attracted do I think that person is to me? And it turns out one gender radically overestimates perceived. I'm guessing which gender. Yeah, so our messaging for guys is, she is not that into you. Keep it professional. And, remember, fiduciary obligation. I don't think it's ever in her best interest to sexualize a mentorship. So I want to keep that in mind.
Okay. We just walked off campus here, and then we walked into a bar, and there were a couple of Biola professors. Right? This looks like a couple of Biola professors, right? No? So but the point here is, what's going on here? Is there anything that looks awkward or untoward or weird or different, or we're questioning, I wonder what's going on there? Could be talking about work, could be talking about business, could be maybe some mentoring or advising or giving some guidance or advice going on, but nothing really kind of awkward or weird going on. But what about this one? Same two different professors out there now. Same bar, still having drinks, but gosh, now I'm not really sure what that is. That could be mentoring, it could be work, But it could be a date, right? And that's all kind of going through the back of our minds to some extent, right? And that's one of the perceptions that we have to deal with, right? And so when it comes to cross-gender relationships, and in particular professional ones in the workplace, we have to think about the perceptions in particular about what might be going on and how do we address those. So some best practices out there. One, we had a senior vice president at Goldman Sachs who talked about how, gosh, I was trying to be very diverse in my mentoring network, having lots of people who didn't look like me, in particular women, but I just couldn't get the women to work with me, right? To come and do the mentoring itself. And he came to realize that he was scheduling all of it in the evenings. It was over drinks, it was over dinner, but it was definitely after working hours, and women just weren't as interested, right? For a variety of different reasons to be there. So he changed it up. He created his own breakfast lunch policy, right? And now he's mentoring a lot more men and women suddenly, right? Now it's done in a way that's very transparent. People understand what's going on, that he mentors men and women, and there's no questions to ask there. So we do have to get through some of the structural issues around where do we mentor, when do we mentor, how do we mentor, if we're going to be able to come together again and overcome some of the perceptions that we know are out there. And you do have to address the perceptions.
So what we'd like to do we have like 10 minutes left or 15 minutes left? Okay. So what we'd like to do with the remainder of our time is just share with you some best practices. So Dave and I were able to write Athena Rising, and the way we did that, when we started telling people we want to write a book how men can get better at mentoring women, the first response we'd often get was, you realize you're two dudes, right? You realize you're guys. How's that? So the way we collected the data is go out and interview lots of women. And we got very senior women and asked them what worked and what didn't for you on your way to the top in relationships with men. And so what I would say is this is sort of what women wish men knew, right, about being better at this. And so that's really what this best practice sort of book is all about.
And the other half of the equation was we got to interview these male mentors of these women in many cases out there and talk to the men about what they learned and what they got out of it as well. So you're going to hear some of their voices in here as well.
Yep. So just very briefly on this is not that guy who takes his shoes off on the airplane. This is that guy. The women said that, the real male ally does two things. Number one, he's supportive, encouraging, and very collaborative interpersonally in a relationship with me, but he also does public stuff, right? If someone says something untoward or sexist, he's the one who says something about it. Or if he notices something in the system for faculty maybe here, he'll bring it up or he'll ask the question, why do we do it this way? Have you noticed that women are making less? This is the kind of person that will ask the question. So remember, it's the personal and it's the public. And I think if you're going to do the allyship stuff well, you've got to do both parts of this.
The number one thing that women told us about the thing that they thought was the most helpful, the most useful in their male mentors was that they had great listening skills. And we asked them, well, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What do you mean exactly? What is it about how they're great listeners? In what way? They said, well, they listened, not making assumptions about who I am as a woman, that therefore I must need or want something in particular, right? And they also listened not with the intent that, hey, I'm here to solve some specific problem for you. I'm listening to hear what's going on, to affirm in some way what you're experiencing, to understand it in a much better way so I have a better awareness. And then if there's something where I need to give some guidance or give you some help or provide resources, I can do that, but that's not the intent of my listening. They also really appreciated when their mentors didn't try to fix them, right? Didn't say, well, hey, you need to change yourself. You need to adapt to the culture, to the organization, to whatever, to become more of a man so that you can succeed in this organization, right? And women often get that message, and so they really appreciate it when their male mentors, the first thing they didn't enter into it was this, hey, we need to fix you first. The things that male mentors brought with them was really a learning orientation. This idea that, hey, I'm not here just to dispense guidance and information. I'm also here to learn along the way. And I have to learn first by asking questions and listening to her before I can really be a good mentor in that way. So the learning orientation is really important. The other aspect of it is what we call gender humility. The fact that, hey, Again, I'm a guy. Doesn't mean I can't possibly understand what a woman might have experienced, but I don't necessarily walked in her shoes. I don't necessarily know the challenges that she has. So let me approach this with a little bit of humility again, a little bit of learning, and maybe I can understand this in a way that I can be a better advocate and ally for her. The last thing I'll leave you with this, we didn't ask any of the men this, but every single male mentor that we talked to, by the end of the interview, came back to tell us that, I feel a little guilty about this mentoring relationship. And we're like, why? It's like, I think I got way more out of it. I learned so much more than she ever did. Really interesting to hear male mentors say that. The other one that I really got tired of hearing from women in particular was this story about they all had multiple stories about the fact that in a meeting or in a team or in some environment, they would contribute. They'd be asked and they would contribute their idea or their recommendation for something, and everybody would be like, okay, whatever. And then 3 guys later, it's the greatest idea since sliced bread when he says it. And it just happened over and over and over again, and it really is very prevalent out there, to the point that one of the women introduced us to the idea that this is what we call bro-propriation. When guys take credit for our ideas. And then another woman told us, no, it's he peated me. But either way, the reality is that there's great social science evidence to back this up, that, again, women's voices are not heard and valued in the same way when they're in these mixed gender groups with men, right? And so as allies and as mentors in the room, we can be attuned to that, right? And so I can go, oh, wait a minute. So Brad, tell me, how is that any different than what Carrie just said, right? And non-confrontational, doesn't have to be all about creating a conflict, a fight in the room, but we can address the fact that, hey, let's make sure that people's ideas are heard and credit is given where it's due.
So one of the people we got to interview for the book was Janet Petro, who runs the Kennedy Space Center, and she was just amazing to talk to. She raved about this guy, Robert Lightfoot, so we got an interview with him. He's director of NASA and was generous enough to let us talk to him, and he was very humble. He said, I really got one thing wrong early in my career over and over again when it came to gender. He said, I was trying to be so gender aware, but I would make assumptions about women. I would say, well, because she's a woman, then certainly she'll want blank. And he said, let me give you an example. We had a senior executive position at NASA. I was on the search committee. We did our work. By a mile, the top candidate was a woman. As we're sitting around the table for our last meeting, I wanted to show how gender savvy I was. And so I said, well, this job involves a lot of travel, and she just had a baby. And he said, luckily, a woman was sitting right across from me with flames coming out of her eyes. She said, Robert, I'm pretty sure she knows this job involves travel, and I'm certain she knows she had a baby. So how about if she's our candidate, how about if we offer her the job and you don't decide for her if this is the right? He said, kind of an epiphany, kind of a light bulb. It seems so obvious right now, but at the moment, I was missing it. I was making assumptions, and I had to really kind of get that messaging.
So can we just say, guys, for a minute, can we just get over the tears issue? This came up again, the fact that men were afraid in mentoring relationships in particular, and it comes out in other places too, that their concern was that they would give some sort of direct critical feedback and it might hurt her feelings, or God forbid she might cry. And so one of the interesting things, if you look at the evidence out there, so biologically, do women produce more tears than men? Yes, they do. They produce more prolactin, and therefore, which produces tears. So they do produce more tears. How they're expressed is culturally and socially different. It's unique to each of the cultures and societies that we grow up in or are socialized in. Our society, the little boys, when they cry, what happens? Don't be a little girl, right? Don't be a sissy, whatever it's, big boys don't cry, whatever it is, right? They're shamed into it. Little girls, not so much, okay? So we socialize this to a large extent, and it's also, it's hard for boys as well as they grow up into young men to deal with emotions because they haven't had to, right? It's always been part of that shaming, and they're not allowed to show emotions, so they don't necessarily know how to deal with emotions in the same way. It comes to play in the workplace again, right? And so what we find is a couple ways. One, as mentors, we may be, again, kind of afraid, and we might pull back from giving feedback or engaging and being as collaborative as we should. One example was from retired now Air Force General Dana Bourne, and when Dana's now at the Harvard Kennedy School there, leading their Center for Public Leadership, and Dana told us a story about how one of her bosses in particular, when she would get really excited about working on something, she wouldn't cry, but she would just get a little misty-eyed, a little watery-eyed, and it really made her boss uncomfortable. And to the point where one day he came into her office and he said, "All right, Dana, I need your help with this. I need your input on this. So unemotionally, what do you think?" And it's like, what a mood killer, right? You're the one I want to work with. So again, we can see how you can see the anxiety there. And how do we get over anxiety again? We got to get exposure, right? So go watch your reruns of Oprah or whatever it takes to kind of get over tears. But it's also part of the challenge piece too, that mentoring is all about, right? We know that good mentors, as they know their people, they know their mentees, they challenge them, they get them out there in those growth stretch assignments, they're developing, right? There's a little bit of that titration of how we're going to bend but not break, right, as they grow. One last example. So in the military, we have a school called the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, SEER School, and it's a very intense training over 2 weeks. The last day of it is in a prisoner of war camp. And let me tell you from personal experience, it feels very real. It is designed to bring people to their breaking points. They're already haven't slept in days, they haven't eaten in days, they are emotionally ready to break, and that is the intent of it. And often people do emotionally break down there. Most men do. When women were first integrated into combat units in the Navy, into aircraft squadrons, back in the mid-90s, we went to the same situation. We get to the prisoner of war camp, men and women get to that point, the men break down and they're getting punished for it or whatever. The women started to break down emotionally, started to tear up, and the instructors, they backed away. Fortunately, it's very highly observed because of the intensity of the training, and so there were observers on the outside that said, "Stop, we got to take a training time out." Talk to the instructors, "Do you realize what you just did?" And they're like, "What?" He started crying, and you made it even twice as bad for him. She started crying, and you just backed away, and they had no idea they were even doing it. So this is, again, kind of a socialized response that we have that sometimes we don't even realize it's happening, how we're withdrawing challenge from people in a way that, again, it's not helping them.
Right. So this is Sheryl Sandberg, and Dave and I were so fortunate to have the opportunity to talk to a number of women who are really leading in some way. And the one takeaway I want to share with you about our interview with Sheryl was about sponsorship. There's been a lot of discussion in the last year, you may have seen it in Harvard Business Review and other outlets, about the fact that maybe women get too much mentoring, but not enough sponsorship, right? Sponsorship is opening doors, networking, creating opportunities. And she said, let me just tell you how it worked for me. My first job out of college was as the primary assistant to the Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. And she said everywhere we went, he would take me along, introduce me to these global leaders and say, this is Sheryl Sandberg. She graduated #1 in economics from Harvard. She is a rock star. I couldn't do this job without her. He would just go on. And after the third or fourth time, she pulled him aside and said, Larry, stop. That's embarrassing. And he said, Sheryl, this is how it begins. This is how it starts for you. You need to let me sponsor you. You need to let me tell people how great you are and get more comfortable with it, because if they know what I think of you, then they're going to want you to work for them. And indeed, her career has taken off. I think a nice description of the way she described it is that what I found with my mentor is that he was my raving fan. My raving fan. And what I would find out later is he was telling people things about my work when I wasn't even around. And I think that's kind of a litmus test for us as men who are mentoring women. Are you sponsoring her the same way you sponsor guys? And one litmus test is, are you talking about her when she's not around, when she's not even in the room, telling people what a great job she's done? And that sponsorship piece, I think, is crucial.
One of the ones that comes up quite a bit in mentoring relationships is how we address again, some very stereotypical aspects of leadership and style in particular, and it can even evolve into the career path as we think about different ways to focus on our careers. So one of the ones we know in particular that women often face this tightrope, this being this either or, right? So I can be smart or I can be pretty, right? I can lead assertively and be called, pick your favorite B word, bossy, right? Okay, I know that's what you were thinking, right? And if they lead in what might be considered a more communal, participative, collaborative style, more what we would call stereotypically feminine, right? Then they're not seen as competent as leaders, right? So there's this constant tightrope that they're always talking about having to navigate that, and that understanding this as men, as male mentors in particular, we might have to figure out how we're going to handle that in particular. And one of the things we talked, again, with male mentors, how did you handle this? And again, they said, hey, we looked, just like with the men, we looked for their strengths, their talents, and their leadership styles, and we focused on those. Bring those to bear, just like we do with the guys, and that's what's going to work best. And the same thing with their careers. And we listen to their dreams and their aspirations of where they want to go and try to help them find and navigate that path. It may not necessarily be what some of the men are doing, it may not be what I did, right? But it's what works best for her based on where she's trying to go and her own unique talents and strengths.
So just last couple things we wanted to share with you. One was the whole notion, Michelangelo, I don't know if you've known much about Michelangelo as a sculptor, but he was known for being remarkably humble. And he would actually say, when a sculpture emerges from the stone, like David or Moses, I'm almost as surprised as anybody else about, what was actually in there. I didn't have a preconception. And I think great mentors have this mindset that my focus is discernment and listening and humility, and let's free all that detritus on the outside of this kind of ideal form. And I think the form this takes when you're mentoring somebody, maybe especially a woman, is listening for the dream. What's her dream? It may not look at all like yours, may be quite different. And the real risk of mentoring, we all do this, is trying to clone ourselves, right, and our mentees. And, I think can feel easily that my path to getting here was the best one, and that's certainly what she should do. Why wouldn't she want to do exactly what I did? And so I got to back away from that and do the discernment and do the listening. And once I hear what the dream sounds like for her, now I can do the sponsorship. Now I can open the right doors, and I got to accept the fact that those may be different, and her way of getting there may be different than the one that I had.
Yeah. So finally, one of the questions that often comes up as we're talking about allies and mentors is kind of should I label myself? Should I be able to call myself one of those things? And it seems when we're talking about mentoring relationships, it seems pretty obvious that it should be okay to call yourself a mentor. And we would say that, in the events that you may have been matched up in some sort of a formal program or in a more formal relationship of mentoring, that's probably part of the deal. But in more informal relationships, that maybe she doesn't consider you a mentor, or maybe she does, right? And that you don't necessarily have to call yourself a mentor. In the same way that if we can be good allies for each other in the workplace, a lot of it is about doing the work. Just do the job, do the work, and if somebody decides to call you an ally or call you a mentor one day, you should feel good about that. But you don't have to always just go around and sling on your mentor cape or your ally cape and be the superhero of the day to save people out there, right? That comes with, it has this notion that it brings back the power and a little bit of privilege that you might have, especially if you're in one of the dominant groups, more traditional groups in your organization out there. So we just say, do the work and be careful about that.
So I think we'll wrap up with this. This just came from about a week ago. Dave and I had a piece in Harvard Business Review just asking men to think very deliberately, if they want to be good allies for women, that here's some kind of rules of the road that you can follow. And I think maybe the very first one there was just the listening. Stop with the fixing, stop with the interrupting, but actually just listen and discern. If I'm invited to actually go to a women's conference or participate in the women's committee, maybe here on campus, I don't need to walk in and then take control, tell you how to do this, solve the problems, but I'd like to come alongside and sort of respect that this is a place that women have been doing this work for a long time, and it's a place for me to ask, how can I contribute here? It certainly doesn't need to be about me. We hear from women that they get tired of this, and they use this term, dudes coming in and mansplaining how we can do gender better, and so I want to make sure I'm not doing that. Certainly being comfortable, not knowing the answers, being able to say I don't know, and then we already mentioned the 2 parts to being a great ally.
Discover who you're called to be at Biola University, a leading Christ-centered university in Los Angeles, with programs on campus and online. Subscribe for more of our videos and learn more at biola.edu.